And now I welcome Elizabeth Mattis Namjal.
Good morning. I'm so delighted and honored to be here. Last night, I was really touched by the opening words, by the dancing and the musical expression. And I was reminded that the Festival of Faith unites us in similar concerns we have regarding many things, regarding the well-being of the earth and how to live respectfully on it. I feel we gather to honor living spirituality, not dogma and rightness, and to celebrate the great potential that comes with being human. And then there are the very basic human concerns of just longing for happiness and freedom from suffering. And I love the metaphor of the blood, because we do all have blood coursing through our veins. At the same time, we also express the uniqueness of our traditions. Last night, we saw the beauty of diversity. People were expressing their authentic ways of dressing and speaking and expressing their own spirituality from their own tradition. And it's this diversity that makes the festival so colorful and so rich. So today, the topic for the panel is one, not two. But I don't know if I think things are one, not two. Because we're talking about diversity on one hand, that's not one, and yet we're talking about our sameness, or what's similar or essential to who we are as human beings. So maybe we can say that we can't exactly say we are one, but we are not two either. And that leaves us in an interesting non-dual place. Maybe like water and ice. You can't separate them, and yet there's this expression of water. Water takes many kinds of forms. If you ask any Eskimo, they can tell you more about it. Anyways, yeah, apparently there's like 100 words for snow or ice. The water, different forms that water takes. So this is the first day of the conference, and I've been asked as a part of the committee that came up with the topic for this festival to open it up a little bit. Sacred insight and feminine wisdom. I think that's quite a full plate, actually. So for me, many questions have arisen around the topic. Challenges, really. Although I find particularly the term feminine really powerful and juicy for me, personally. So I've thought of some questions. I want to share these with you, and I want to try to open them up as I go on. The first question is, what is insight exactly? And what is the difference between insight and sacred insight? And why are we coupling the term feminine with wisdom? What does it mean that we assign a gender to something that has such a vast meaning and scope, such as wisdom? I have to wonder, does wisdom actually have a gender? And yet, at the same time, it seems that the feminine most certainly has a role to play in our spiritual traditions and in our lives, historically and symbolically. So I want to open these up just a little bit. So let's start with the word feminine. So Sarah Harris came up with this idea, feminine. And we could see that this was here to stay, that this was going to be part of the topic. And it really has excited me, although, like I said, I have my questions. But again, as she was saying last night, this idea of feminine wisdom has been germinating for several years with us. And it came way before even the Me Too movement or the women's marches. So, you know, this has been brewing. So the intention for us on the committee came from this longing to celebrate something that goes way beyond ordinary ideas of gender, I think. But also, we want to honor the feminine and how it shows up in spirituality. You know, I was thinking, for instance, in Taoism, you have the yin, which is the feminine, and then you have the yang, which is the masculine. And you have the circle with the black and the white coming together, uniting. We have Sophia, which I know Christopher will talk about soon, which is Greek, wisdom, feminine. We talk about the Divine Mother in certain traditions, Mother Earth. In the Buddhist Mahayana tradition, which is my tradition, the feminine is the wisdom aspect, while the male aspect is compassionate response, informed by wisdom. This is our time. So then there's the earthly feminine. Here we want to honor our grandmothers, our mothers, our sisters, our wives, and our daughters. No less divine than the symbolic ones that I mentioned before. Actually, when I listened to and watched the women in the church last night, I thought, that's divine, that's sacred. Everything that was being expressed, and I felt this certain sense of closeness last night, and it felt very intimate and authentic to me. You know, I think it's sometimes important to single out or shine a light on a specific demographic. Women and girls have had their own challenges throughout history, and they continue to make a profound and very unique impact and contribution in the world. So, like many mentioned last night, when I think of the feminine, what comes up first is the mother. And, you know, what are the qualities of a mother? I've been thinking, wondering. Well, mothers are those who have given birth. That is no small matter. But the pregnancy and the labor are the easy part. I can say this from experience, even. Mothers have a challenge that's very interesting, I find. And when talking to other mothers, I find this to be true as well. They have to bear witness to the joys and the sufferings and the struggles of their children. So the mother is really a symbol of unconditional love in both humans and animals. As a mother myself, I remember the unsurpassable joy I felt when my son was born. But it was really a bittersweet thing, because the moment he was born, I could already feel the pain of the separation. As a mother, I think, as mothers, we feel that our children are almost like an appendage of ourselves, and the connection runs very, very deep. A month or so ago, I was in San Francisco, and I wandered into Grace Cathedral. And it just happened that there was a funeral service in session that day, and the husband of the woman who died of MS had this exhibit out on the walls. He had made these woodblock carvings and also had some photographs of homeless people. But the woodblock carvings depicted what he called the 8 stations of the cross. So it's the personal journey of Christ's sacred pilgrimage to his own crucifixion. And in this presentation, his mother, Mary, was eminent. And I often haven't considered that Mary was there every step of the way during this sacred and very painful pilgrimage situation. And she had to bear witness to the most painful acts. She watched her son build the instrument of his execution. She watched as he fell under the weight of the cross 3 times and she witnessed his crucifixion. And then, of course, in the end, she held his lifeless body in her arms, of her son in her arms, which is that very painful and loving image of mother and son that we all know so well. So this is the mother, and you know, I was not raised a Christian, but I could understand. My spiritual tradition is the Buddhist Mahayana, and the mother comes up a lot in our tradition. One practice asks ourselves to see everyone as our mother, but it is also practice to look upon all beings with the same care and adoration you might have for your own children. And we have a great Buddhist saint or great practitioner named Shantideva who said in his famous text, The Way of the Bodhisattva, just as we include our arms and our legs, our appendages, as part of the trunk of our body, you know, like if we stub our toe, we kind of reach out to try to, soothe it or something. In the same way, we should consider that all beings are an appendage of our self, what we consider our self. In other words, make the world your body. So it's interesting because a lot of people interpret caring for others as having to get rid of self-care or rejecting the ego. Even in Buddhism, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this, getting rid of the ego. But there's something really fantastic about this because what it's saying is that you don't have to get rid of your ego at all. All you have to do is make it as big as you possibly can and make others the recipient of the love and care you usually reserve only for yourself. We can do that. So this brings us out of this really self-focused, fearful, puny existence and awakens courage, intelligence, and love. My mother-in-law, who was born on the eastern plateaus of Tibet, which is a horse culture, she always said, you should make your heart big enough to hold a horse race inside. You're from Kentucky, you get that. To her, that was enormous. So this kind of love that we're talking is a fierce, unconditional, and all-encompassing love. And the longing to expand the self to include others drives the bodhisattva, that means the one who awakens the heart through serving others, on the path of enlightenment. And the bodhisattva only has one fear, because it's a fearless path. And that fear is the fear of being severed from the sufferings of the world and living in a state of personal peace. So to understand this is to understand that this is really not a religious endeavor, so to speak. I think it's a human endeavor. It is a practice of making ourselves big, enough to bear witness to the beauty and the pain of the world without shutting down. And we do this, when we do this kind of puny and fearful sense of me, mine, and I begins to find freedom and joy in including others, and it becomes an obsession. So as we begin to reach out, we begin to realize that our own and others' liberation are inextricably linked. So when we begin to move into this topic of expanding the self to include others, I think in a way we're moving away just from this notion of feminine wisdom as a gender into what it means to be a spiritual practitioner. And insight no longer becomes a matter of the body we inhabit. I want to say something about insight. I think insight is really a very basic human gift. It allows us to read patterns, to connect the dots. It means to know or discern. It can track seed and fruit, seed to sprout, to tree, to fruit, to more seeds. And then we can have agriculture and sustain ourselves. So in our ability to read patterns in ourselves and others, we learn how to navigate the world in an intelligent way. We learn what is the best breakfast cereal to buy too, and where to send our kids to school, and Am I causing harm, or am I creating benefit? How can I serve? This all requires discernment. I think we often confuse insight or knowing or discernment with capturing truth. But in fact, insight is not a static thing. We are a part of an infinite web of contingent relationships. And the world keeps changing, and we are changing right along with it. So what we call experience is really a playful exchange of our inner and our outer worlds. And there's constant feedback going on. It can be very playful and painful too. But what I find, I don't know about you, is that life is always bursting from the seams of my ideas. So insight can serve us just as long as we know that things are not limited to what we think about them. And I think this is an important point, because when we do, we fall into what I consider to be fundamentalism. And we often think fundamentalism is something other fundamentalist people do. But in fact, fundamentalism is looking at someone and thinking we know who they are. No thing is singular, permanent, or lives outside the nature of causes and conditions. So I'm struck by this fundamentalism. Sometimes I often see it myself when we shut down around an experience and we think we know it, and the negative emotions start to arise. I recognize that as a form of fundamentalism in myself. I think humility is an amazing thing. And I am struck by the sense of humility that I've seen in indigenous cultures. And just something came to mind, perhaps because I heard Lila speak last night as well. But for the past 2 years, I've been going to Canyon de Chelly with a group of people to do meditation retreats in the canyon. And the Diné people live there. And you ask them, you look at a rock and there's like these beautiful monoliths there, and you say, what is this called? Because there's different names for things. And they say, well, if you stand to the right, it's called Saddle Rock. And if you stand to the left, it's called, the Bear Rock. And it just depends on where you stand. So there's this kind of flexibility and openness, and not thinking that things exist in the object, so that the kind of way they see the natural world becomes very sacred and alive. I think this is a little bit of what I'm talking about, that insight needs to be open and flexible and dynamic because the world is that way. So now I have 2 minutes and 18 seconds to talk about sacred insight, so I'm going to try. So sacred insight is not something easy to talk about. I think it's not valued in conventional society so much. It's not looked upon as practical. So I feel grateful we're talking about it here. But sometimes I feel I'm living in a parallel universe. One moment I turn on the news and I feel a strong sense of despair, and at other times I see someone step up and do something brilliant, or I see an autumn leaf, the last one, fall from a tree. And I feel all of a sudden overcome by the beauty and poignancy of it all, and it feels perfect. And I think when we say everything is perfect, we're in danger of people thinking we're living in a total state of denial. And in a way, it's true. There is old age, sickness, and death. There is abuse, war, and environmental degradation. But I don't think that sacred insight has to do with seeing things as perfect as opposed to imperfect, or sublime as opposed to temporal or ordinary. I've come to discover that perfect happiness happens when we step outside dualism altogether. It is a mind in awe of its fathomless universe. There is a sense of humility in it. There is not the arrogance that is behind pushing away pain and grasping at beauty. There is a fierceness and willingness to embrace it. I think in the conventional world, people cherish these moments of awe, but they think they're not practical and that they have to return to the gritty realities of life and just basic survival. But I do think awe has a practical place in our lives. It protects us from fundamentalism and rightness. If we have no sense of humility, even the virtuous things we engage in become fundamentalistic. Like you could be a fundamentalist vegetarian, or a fundamentalist activist, or a fundamentalist environmentalist. So to operate from rightness is really a failure to see the way the world really is in a realistic way. To acknowledge that we only ever see a piece of things, to understand that this very moment is a coming together of infinite contingent relationships, that the world is too dynamic and rambunctious for the lives of our ideas. This is, I think, has something to do with sacred insight. And I don't think it's endowed from above. To me, it seems to come from understanding our relationship to the world and how we live and embracing it with humility. So I feel this has been a great opportunity to praise this understanding, this bigger truth that is not an object of our intellect. The intellect is good at grasping and labeling, but there's something very profound about honoring that here. In my tradition, the ability to embrace or experience things without shutting down around labels and ideas really is the sacred feminine. So without further ado, I think we have to move on. And let me invite the other three panelists to come up. So we are going to begin with Pravrajika Brahma Prana.
Good morning. God the Mother, a pathway to the non-dual reality. I'd like to start by just introducing who I am. I'm a sannyasini of the Ramakrishna Order of India, a lineage that was established formally in the 8th century Common Era by the seer philosopher Shankara. And it was the non-dual Advaita Vedanta school of philosophy and spirituality. Ramakrishna was a great Hindu mystic. He lived from 1836 to 1886. He was a priest in a temple just outside of Kolkata at Dakshineshwar. And his uniqueness was he practiced various conflicting sects within Hinduism. The followers of Krishna, of Rama, of Shiva, the Divine Mother, all to their culmination. He went on to receive initiation into the Shankara order and attained nirvikalpa samadhi within 3 days, and then went on to live in that state of nirvikalpa samadhi for 6 months, force-fed by a wandering monk who understood the state he was in. This is unparalleled in the history of the world religions. And then he went on to practice Islam to its culmination. He received the vision of Christ. He understood the subtle practices of Buddhism, and he honored the Jain and Sikh teachers. Sri Ramakrishna was able to verify from his own experience the great Vedic dictum, Ekam Sadvipra Bahuda Vedanti. Truth is one, sages call it by various names. And his profound corollary to that, as many people, so many paths. In other words, all forms of God, all aspects of the divine, all paths, whether dualistic, qualified non-dualistic, or non-dualistic, lead to the ultimate reality. In our tradition, we call it Sat, Chit, Ananda. Existence, consciousness, bliss absolute. So what is the divine feminine's relationship to non-dualism? Swami Vivekananda, the foremost disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who spoke at the first World Parliament of Religions in 1893 in this country, he said, God the Mother is the first and highest manifestation of the Absolute. Next, the Christs and Buddhas. Well, why and how is this possible? In the Rig Veda, the oldest of the four Vedas, which are the oldest living scriptures of the world, the goddess emerges as powerful and without consort. She is called Vak, the Word. We find in her first-person utterances that are rare in the Rig Veda. She says, I spread the heavens over the earth. I am the energy of Brahman. I am the mother of all. It is for me that Brahman resides in all intellects, and it is I who have penetrated all the worlds with my power, and am holding them in their places. Again, apart from this, I remain always the all-intelligent, primal energy, as well as the one intelligent being, perfect and untouched by my magic creation. So we see in the Vedanta Hindu tradition, this motherhood of God is a vast, all-embracing reality. Our Vedanta paradigm of reality is twofold. Brahman, the one undivided reality, is called Satchidananda. And Maya, the divine feminine, is the veiling power which superimposes the dream world appearance upon the reality of Brahman, pure consciousness. So we have the power of the divine feminine who veils Brahman and projects a dreamlike, impermanent reality. And when the Divine Mother breaks this dream, the supreme reality is revealed. So to the non-dualist Advaita Vedantin, Mother holds the key. The second paradigm is Brahman, which is likened to fire, which is one of the most ancient symbols of Brahman. And the divine feminine, which we call Shakti, is its power to burn, the creative force. The two are inseparable, Brahman and Shakti, fire and its power to burn. We cannot imagine fire without burning, and there is no burning without fire. All images of the goddess reflect a particular manifestation of power and are windows into the non-dual reality. Our religion is non-dual. Each aspect of the divine is a symbol, a window into the non-dual. Mother Kali, she severs the head of ignorance, the ego she holds in one hand, dispels fear with another, and grants boons with yet another to those who take refuge in her. And she stands on the inert principle of Lord Shiva and articulates and ushers in the universe. Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Mother Kali in the Dakshineshwar temple. How does his first vision of Mother Kali match Swami Vivekananda's claim of Mother as the first and highest manifestation of the Absolute? After his first vision, he revealed, "I felt undiluted bliss and the immediate presence of the Divine Mother. The room, doors, temple, everything vanished, and I saw an infinite, shoreless ocean of light. That ocean was consciousness. However far and in whatever direction I looked," he said, "I saw shining waves, one after another, coming towards me to swallow me up. Later," he said, "I scarcely realized the presence of people around me. They looked more like shadows or painted pictures than real objects." So this description of the formless aspect of God the Mother is the borderline between the realm of the relative world and the absolute. What about the experience of the divine feminine, then, in a living example? For example, Sita, the consort of Rama, Radha, the consort of Krishna, Mother Mary, Sarada Devi, the virgin wife of Sri Ramakrishna, who lived from 1853 to 1920 and is recognized as an emblem of the Divine Mother and of Vedanta. Sarada Devi was Sri Ramakrishna's first disciple, and she was the recipient of his teachings and his grace. She attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and her own non-dual experience informed her motherhood and how it manifested. She experienced the same shoreless ocean of light, pure consciousness, as Sri Ramakrishna. The finite mind dissolving into the cosmic mind, and the wave of the higher self immersed in the ocean of Brahman. As one with this shoreless ocean of Brahman, Sarada Devi recognized waves as individual beings that had birth and existence within her as her children. In the Devi Mahatmyam, in this 11th chapter, verse 33, an ancient scripture to the Divine Mother, it is said, "O Queen of the universe, you protect the universe. As the self of the universe, you support the universe. Those who surrender to you become the refuge of the universe." This impersonal vision is a source and was a source of her loving relationship with all, whoever and whatever that exists. No matter who visited Sarada Devi in Kolkata or in Jairambati, her village just outside of Kolkata, rich or poor, saint or sinner, educated or not, Hindu or non-Hindu, all felt she was their mother, and she recognized all as her children. She fed, nurtured, counseled, and protected them. And that is how her non-dual vision of oneness broke rigid orthodoxies and cast barriers and quietly became precedents in Hindu society today. It is also how her non-dual vision elevated work to the level of worship. In her simple village thatched hut, she performed the most menial housework and service as an act of worship that elevated all who witnessed it or received it. For contemporary men and women in our tradition, Sarada Devi's example shows us how any work can transform us, and any workplace can become our spiritual arena. Sarada Devi's non-dual experience informed her attitude toward all creatures. A village cat used to lay quietly at her feet, and one day when an attendant mistreated it, she instructed that rice be specially prepared for it and its family, saying, "Don't mistreat the cats. Even in them am I," speaking from the non-dual plane of consciousness. The same consciousness she saw even in inanimate objects. One day, an attendant was sweeping her room, and when finished, threw the broom to one side. And she said, "What? Should you neglect something because it is small? Whatever you care for will take care of you. Whatever regard a thing deserves, that must be accorded to it. Even the broom must be treated respectfully." Sarada Devi's, she manifested non-dualism, Satchit Ananda, through the eye of her unconditional love. As one great Swami of our order, a disciple of one of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna, stated, "This chit of Satchitananda is loving consciousness. Not just consciousness, but loving consciousness. A seer who has that experience sees light, and that light is loving consciousness." That experience gave Sarada Devi the eye of equality and equanimity that we see in her life and her teachings. And before she passed away, she instructed a devotee with these immortal words, "My child, I tell you one thing. If you want peace of mind, do not find fault with others. Rather see your own faults. Learn to make the whole world your own. No one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your own." Thank you.
So I'd like to ask if any of the other panelists have any questions for Pravajika.
Well, I was struck very much by so many of the names, the terms, the stories are foreign to me that you shared with us. But there's a kind of music in the story itself and in the terminology that resonates. And I wonder for you, were you steeped in, were you raised in, as a child, these stories? Did you come to them later in life? How did you hear the music of this tradition?
I was raised Christian, and my parents broke away from the church when I was 12 years old. And by the time I was in college, I was agnostic. And my father died, and so I suffered a great depression, wondering if God is real, if religion is true. And it was through a comparative religions course at a private college in Los Angeles. We were reading the Houston Smith's book, The Religions of Man, and went to the Vedanta temple. And when I walked into the temple in Hollywood, I saw this little man seated on the shrine dais, and I knew he was a man of God, and that religion was true. So I came in my 20s. Yeah. But it took many years of practice before I felt completely imbued in the mythic universe of the Vedanta Hindu tradition.
Beautiful. I guess one reflection I have is just that I appreciated your acknowledgement of the validity of so many different paths. In the Native American world, in California, what we now know as California alone, there were 82 languages spoken. We have many, 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 many creation stories, hundreds of them, thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. And when you live in a multinational context of so many languages and cultures and creation stories, we came to the conclusion that every single creation story was true. We did not need to validate one over another. And that's what our wise ones told us, that they are all true. And so I really appreciated that, how you opened up with that. So thank you.
So now it's time to move on to Christopher Premuk. Please honor us with your wisdom from your tradition.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you guys bring the slides up for me? Thank you. So I want to say a few words about Thomas Merton. Many of you will know Thomas Merton and his story a little bit. The city of Louisville has kind of adopted Thomas Merton as a favorite son, which is a beautiful thing, the city of compassion. I said a moment ago that there's a kind of music in the stories, the words, the languages of these different traditions. And I think one of Merton's great gifts was the ability to listen deeply and absorb the music of different traditions and then translate them for people in the West. And so I want to say a word about sacred wisdom, and I hope you hear some resonances across our three presentations, kind of like perhaps a Bach fugue or something, a point, counterpoint, that these melody lines intersect and weave together in ways that are very beautiful and sometimes surprising. I want to begin with a prayer to sacred wisdom that is sung in my own Catholic tradition around the world in churches during the holy season of Advent, that season of pregnant anticipation and waiting for the coming of God. And it goes something like this. O wisdom, you came forth from the mouth of the Most High, and reaching from the beginning to the end, you ordered all things mightily and sweetly. Come and teach us the way of your peace. And then the people sing, Amen. Amen. Thank you. The name Sophia, as was mentioned earlier, is the Greek name for wisdom. If the dominant face of God in the Bible comes to us in traditionally masculine imagery, wisdom, or Sophia, is the Bible's more hidden counter-testimony to the feminine face of God. She appears especially in the books of wisdom and Proverbs as a kind of divine child, an animating presence at play within the whole of creation. God with us in the dance of life as it springs forth from the natural world. In other passages, she appears as a woman and as a prophet. Crying out from the crossroads of the city, she brings hope especially to the little and to the poor, beckoning humanity toward a future of justice and peace. The Jewish rabbinic traditions would later call her the Shekinah, from the Hebrew word shakan, which means to dwell as if in a tent. She is the one who accompanies the people of God in their exile and in their despair. She brings reassurance. She galvanizes their freedom. She awakens hope. Thomas Merton was haunted by the wisdom passages in the Bible. He was haunted by her presence in the liturgy and iconography of Eastern Orthodoxy. Above all, he was moved by her presence in a number of Russian mystical theologians whose books Merton was reading during the late 1950s. But more and more, in the last years of his life, Thomas Merton was haunted by wisdom herself. She came to him in his dreams. He heard her in the wind blowing through the oak and poplar trees outside his hermitage. She came to him in the shy fawn who played every morning in the meadow along the gravel road leading down to the monastery. And perhaps most famously, she came to him in Louisville at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the midst of the secular city, when Merton, as he would later write, was suddenly overwhelmed by the realization that I loved all those people, even though we were total strangers. But what is not so well known about this story is how Merton himself would later interpret the experience. Some months later, in a letter to the Russian writer Boris Pasternak, the author of Dr. Zhivago, right? He tells Pasternak what happened to him in Louisville on the street corner, and he invokes the divine feminine, the biblical name of proverb, to describe the beauty and secret purity he saw in the faces of the strangers passing him by. And he tells Pasternak, they did not know their real identity as the child, so dear to God, who before the beginning was playing in his sight all days, playing in the world. Near the end of the famous 4th and Walnut passage, you may recall Merton asks an almost unbelievably poignant question. How do we tell people that they are walking around shining like the sun? And Merton would find an answer in the image of wisdom, proverb, Sophia. The divine perspective had broken through, and it seemed to Merton, as he put it, like news that one holds the winning ticket in a cosmic sweepstake. Oh. Buddhism speaks of non-duality and interbeing. Jesus speaks of building the reign of God on earth as it is in heaven. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of the beloved community where every mother's child is welcome and can flourish. Merton speaks of a hidden wholeness, or the hidden ground of love, all gesturing to the one great mystery that beneath our manifold differences, we are bound together, as King put it, in a single garment of destiny. Behold, we are not 2 or 2,000 or 2 billion, but one still unfolding creation within the body of God. To reclaim the feminine divine in our communities would be to celebrate the fullness of God, the freedom of God to manifest in and through all things, beyond the conceptual prisons and rigid binaries in which we so often trap the divine mystery. As Merton puts it, for God is not only a father, but a mother. He is both at the same time. This is a very ancient intuition in reality which goes back to the oldest Oriental thought. For the masculine-feminine relationship is basic in all reality, simply because all reality mirrors the reality of God. All of these insights would come to fruition in Merton's great prose poem of 1961, Hagia Sophia. He writes, there is in all things an invisible fecundity, a dimmed light, a meek namelessness, a hidden wholeness. This mysterious unity and integrity is wisdom, the mother of all, natura naturans. There is in all things an inexhaustible sweetness and purity, a silence that is a fount of action and joy. It rises up in wordless gentleness and flows out to me from the unseen roots of all created being, welcoming me tenderly, saluting me with indescribable humility. This is at once my own being, my own nature, and the gift of my Creator's thought and art within me, speaking as Hagia Sophia, speaking as my sister wisdom. And just a little later in the poem, pay attention here to the wisdom, to the image of the child. He says, "O blessed, silent one who speaks everywhere, we do not hear the soft voice, the gentle voice, the merciful and feminine. We do not hear mercy or yielding love or non-resistance or non-reprisal. Yet she is the candor of God's light, the expression of his simplicity. We do not see the child who is prisoner in all the people and who says nothing." For as long as I have known and studied this text, that last image has stopped me, haunted me to this day. What can Merton mean? We do not see the child who is prisoner in all the people and who says nothing. I want to ask you to consider with me just for a moment another poem that Merton wrote in 1961, the same year he wrote Hagia Sophia. This poem, too, is centered on the image of the child, only the child in this poem is the atomic bomb. The poem, called Original Child Bomb, takes its name from the name that the Japanese people, the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, would give later to the bomb. They called it Original Child, Merton says, because they recognized that it was the first of its kind. On August 1st, 1945, American technicians assembled the bomb, giving it their own special name. They called it Little Boy. And their care for this new creation, notes Merton, was devoted and tender. A month earlier, in July of 1945, when the time had come for the bomb to be tested in the desert of New Mexico, scientists gave a special name to this top secret operation. They called it Trinity. Thus, Trinity gave birth to an original child, newly born into the world by means of human ingenuity and science and strategic military calculation. On August 5th, 1945, Little Boy was nestled devoutly into the womb of the Enola Gay, the bomber named for the mother of one of the pilots. Some days after the original child fell from the sky, immediately incinerating 70,000 people, President Truman summed up the situation in a few almost devotional words. "We found the bomb," he said, "and we used it." And so here, perhaps, in this iconic image, we behold the child who is prisoner in all the people and who says nothing. Or what Merton will call the night face of Sophia. A kind of post-Christian Madonna and child, he might say, for the nuclear age, when men of power dig deep into the earth, playing fast and loose with the very stuff of life. It was against the desecration of the divine image in humanity, against the plundering of the earth, our mother, our common home, in the words of Pope Francis, against the horror of replacing the divine child in us with a nuclear one. Merton would interject the gentle voice of Sophia, at once my own being, my own nature, and the gift of my Creator's thought and art within me. But do we have the eyes to see? Do we have the ears to hear her voice crying out in our world today? There is a beautiful teaching in the Hebrew, in the Jewish tradition, a phrase called tikkun olam. Tikkun olam. A Hebrew phrase meaning to repair the world, the rescuing to make good of what is left of this smashed world. The late theologian Rita Gross, a wonderful theologian of both Jewish and Buddhist heritage, I think she got it exactly right when she wrote, "When the masculine and the feminine aspects of God have been reunited and the female half of humanity has been returned from exile, we will begin to have our tikkun olam. The world will be repaired." Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Any questions or comments?
I am so struck by Merton's experiences, and as a Vedanta nun, how deeply they resonated with me. And it reminds me of the one definition of Vedanta is spirituality and spirituality alone. It is something that is a language that is shared by all traditions. It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Chris. I think I was just struck with the emotion with which you presented and the connection to your own soul and your own love for art, music, poetry, to really embody that divine masculine who is not pigeonholed into the norms of Western society as tough and invincible and impenetrable, but rather unafraid, so brave, so courageous that he would take off his armor and bare his heart to the world. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Shall I?
Well, now the schedule says it's time to stretch.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce, finish stretching. I'd like to introduce Naomi Louisa O'Connell, an Irish-German opera singer and actress, and Brent Underberg, who's the pianist, the dynamic duo we saw last night. And I'd also just like to mention that Lila June will be speaking afterwards. So.
So yesterday, after the opening celebration, I was in a van and I overheard a fragment of a conversation. And the sentence was, yes, the words we use are so important. So yes to that. I'm going to add from Tom Stoppard. He says, if you get the right ones in the right order, you can nudge the world a little. It's great, right? Beautiful thought. Songs are like that too. And the three that we've chosen for you, we have 3 songs by American composers, quite short, Bernstein, Blitzstein, and Bolcom. They are exactly that. They're a nudge in the right direction, a nudge for hope, for courage, a nudge to find the words to frame a society that holds equality and respect for humanity at the highest possible standard. Because we all know in this room that we are a long, long, long way away from that. And that is frustrating, and it's unfair, and it's horrifying, right? So for somebody like me, who is very quick to anger, it is important for me to remember that we're on a journey to making it right. It begins with a conversation. So, on that vein, I would ask you all to please close your eyes with me. And put a hand on your heart. Let's take a breath together. And I would like you to picture a child of about 10 years of age. This could be a child that you know. If nobody comes immediately to mind, it can be yourself. Picture that child, picture them clearly. Picture them smiling. Maybe they're holding a balloon. The first song we will perform is for that child. Now, beside that child, I would like you to picture an older person, a person who's lived a life with both joy and hardship in it. Again, this could be somebody you know, this could be yourself. The third song we'll perform is for that person. And between these two, I would like you to put yourself, as you are right now in this body, in this room. The second song we'll sing is for you. I just found out today that I'm a person too, like you. I like balloons, lots of people like balloons, but everyone says, isn't she cute? She likes balloons. I'm a person too, like you. I like things that everyone likes. I like soft things and movies and horses and warm things and red things. Don't you? I have lots of thoughts, like what's behind the sky, and what's behind the sky. But everyone says, isn't she sweet? She wants to know everything, don't you? Of course, I'm very young to be saying all these things in front of so many people like you. But I'm a person too, though I'm only 10 years old. I'm a person too, like you. I've an unrest inside me. Oh, it's long I have had such an unrest inside me, and it's getting real bad. I'm sleeping at night, and my heart beats so loud that I wake all dizzy and light with the dreaming and feeling this ache, such a thumping inside me that I think I'll go mad. For I wish it so, what I wish I still don't know, but it's bound to come, though so long to wait. I keep saying tonight or today through the endless days, and my heart clamors and prays it will not come too late. But when come it does, in the shape of love or life, I will give my life and my love I know. I've such grand aims with so many needs that I grow numb, but sure one is bound to come, because I wish I I've been waiting, waiting, waiting all my life. That light keeps on hiding from me, but it someday just might bless my sight. Waiting, waiting, waiting. Thank you.
So next we have the honor of hearing Lila June speak of her tradition.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself first in my language to start. Yat e shik e doshidene she nanisht ejit kachi in the shlono haska itine e bashishi ashin het shichedo belagana e dashinale Lila June dashijene beedil dasinil shagan akwit ego dane as anishlo. I'm of the Dene Nation. We are indigenous to what is now called New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. But we call it Denetra, Denebakea, the people's land. And I'd like to honor the Shawnee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Cherokee, who called this place home and prayed here for many hundreds of thousands of years before America was even a thought. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of this panel, to join in this diversity. Really, really grateful, and each of you really inspired me a lot. I'd like to discuss non-dualism perhaps in a slightly different, from a slightly different angle, because in Dene tradition, a lot of things come in twos. To say two, you say na ke. Can you guys say that? Na ke. Now you know how to say two in my language. Nice job. Na ke is not just two, though. The word itself is imbued with sacred meaning. You have night and you have day. You have the sun, you have the moon. You have male, you have female. Many things come in twos. Many things also come in fours. Fall, summer, winter, spring, infancy, adolescence, parenthood, elderhood, the four directions, the four sacred mountains. Many things come in sevens as well. The Pleiades has 7 major stars. So we honored Creator's numbers. We honored the numbers that we saw around us as sacred. And so to be two is not seen as a bad thing. In fact, two is essential for the creation of life. And I also want to acknowledge here in this moment that today we have more than 2 genders. We have many people who do not feel they conform to male or female, and they are LGBTQ or transgendered. And I think as we're talking about the divine masculine and divine feminine, we must create a space of honor for those who do not feel they fit into that binary. So I just want to mention that too. Thank you. And there is this sacredness of two-ness at the same time. And I'm also a believer in paradox, that we can be many and one at the same time. We can give an academic speech and do hip-hop at the same time. So prepare yourself for that. And we can have God within us and also be held by God at the same time. So this two-ness is sacred in our traditions. And the Plains people, they have the pipe. Hollywood calls it the peace pipe, right? But it's much deeper than that and has a lot of sophisticated wisdom embedded within it. But some tribes call it the Chanupa. And Nupa means two in the Lakota language. Can we say Nupa? There. And Nupa is the joining of the red stone bowl and the wooden stem. And the red stone bowl signifies the mother, the birther, through which each of us got here through her. None of us can enter this sacred earth except through the portal of a womb. It's the only way you're getting here. And each and every person sitting here, sometimes I like to think about that. It's like, as many people are sitting in this room is as many times as a woman screamed in anguish as she gave birth to a human being, you know, and really held that being for 9 months with love. But so anyways, that is the stone bowl. And then you have the wooden stem, which represents the father. And so both are considered equal. And this object was given to the people when there was famine and social discord. And so the white buffalo calf woman gave this to the people. And we know that Creator sent a woman to give this to the people for a reason, because at that time, women were not being respected. And she didn't give them food. She didn't give them an economic strategic plan. She didn't give them counseling or anything like that. She gave them this understanding that when the connection between the mother and the father, the male and the female, was healed, was held in respect and consent, the people would have peace. The people would have food. She said that even our ecology, our web of life that we're a part of, is founded upon men and male and female human beings connecting in a positive manner. And so as we know right now, there's a huge resurgence of the feminine occurring, everything from the Women's March to this conference itself, to what is occurring in Palestine that I recently saw when I went there, is this confronting patriarchy. Beautiful things are happening. And at the same time, I believe we must also honor the masculine, to not overcorrect, to not demonize the masculine. Because at this moment in time, we must understand, we must see through the tricks, that it is not men who have harmed the world. It is a dark force that works through both men and women. And that this dark force is what my elders told me, because I've been through a lot of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, and both men and women have done this to my body. I used to be a drug addict, so that's a whole nother story. But in that state, I got hurt a lot. And the ancestors and the angels sent me a message. They said, Lila June, it is not men who has hurt you. It is the dark. And so to honor both the feminine and the masculine in this time, and to see them both as two crucial parts of a whole, and to see them as equal, and to see them as beautiful, I think that is the healing that is being requested of us in this time. to see each other as beautiful, to see each other as sacred, and to honor the fact that our brothers, our male-centered folks, they are, like I said, pigeonholed in a world where they're not allowed to feel. They're not allowed to express emotion. And my elders tell me that it's actually men who are the emotional ones, not women. And so the being, the half of society that is the most emotional is given the least amount of space to feel, to process. And so my little message I have today, because I don't have much time, is that we need to give men folks a place to feel. And we need to give women folks a place to be safe. And recognize that it is not either of us that is the demon, but it is the darkness, the puppet master above that plays off of both feminine and masculine fear that is to blame for the situation that we see. So that coming together, that unification of each other, and recognizing one another as sacred, as beautiful, as kind, as generous, that will generate the true healing that we need. So with that, I wanted to, since we're on the topic of unity, I wanted to do a hip hop piece, because I saw there's many youth here. Actually, I don't have my glasses on, so I think you're youth. I'm pretty sure. I was like, I think. And you know, I think hip hop is an important way for us to get these messages across. And to not only link the masculine and the feminine, but to link the generations, to honor and respect the generations that are here. And sometimes we like hip hop. So this rap is about unity, and I'm actually going to use that microphone. Thank you, sound techs. Mic check. Okay.
We were all given sacred duties to this land. Take care of Mother Earth and she will help you understand that everything we need is in the palm of her hand. No need to drill, mine, conquer, or extract. With faith in the Creator, we will blaze a brand new path. When we let go of fear, the greed turns into laughter. Unity of all people, that is what we're after. Cruising down the red road with sweetgrass on my dashboard. Used to drug and drink, but now I'm sober, now I'm faster. Sharp as a tack, he told me can't hold me back now. I just want to build a new world for my children. With love, prayer, and unity, this nation is rebuilding. Up from the ash of genocide and division. Red, black, yellow, white as one, that's the vision. Every race participates in this new beginning. Sacred is the masculine and sacred is the feminine. Infinite, indigenous, continuous, deliberate. Nothing can stop the people once they got their intention set. Some people say that the land can be owned. Some people say that the land can be owned. But deep in our hearts, we know it isn't so, because we don't even keep this flesh or this bone. No, we can't take it with us on the soul's journey home. The only thing we keep is the lessons that we know. So when we wake from the slumber to remember we are one beautiful people under one beautiful sun, we must also release all claims to the earth, because she don't belong to us. We belong to her. Mother Earth was meant to be a place where we could learn. We pray to Sapa for a blessing on the world. We practice Satyagraha because violence doesn't work. We pray for those who are injured and those who injure. Unconditional prayer for the whole wide world. Sun dance year round. Yeah, we let the sage burn, because when we pray for the people, we will start to understand what it means to be true woman, what it means to be true man. Cradled in the arms of the sky and the sand, just a strand in the tapestry of the master plan. Because together there is nothing that we cannot achieve. Together there is nothing that we cannot achieve. Can I hear you say that? Together there is nothing that we cannot achieve. Together there is nothing that we cannot achieve. Together there is nothing that we cannot achieve. Achieve, find love, find healing, find unity. Honjon nahasli, honjon nahasli, honjon nahasli, honjon nahasli. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, a lot of questions come up. Can I say something? Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Now we're going to have a discussion, so we can all say stuff. Thank you for that. Fantastic. So you said something, two is not dual. I thought that was wonderful and interesting. And it shed some light on this whole term, dual, because, dual just in a certain way means there's interdependence. But I think when we forget that we're interdependent, then we have problems. Like you were just talking about the earth, and when we forget that, our relationship to the earth and the planet and to other beings is not connected, we have problems. But the fact that we are connected, actually, that's the truth of it, isn't it? And that's what makes everything happen.
Yeah, that's what I was actually struggling to articulate.
Well, you did, though.
Is that-
It was great. I thought you did very well.
That it's not two-ness that is bad, but otherness that is bad.
Otherness.
Or demonizing another that is problematic.
Yeah. And then when you were speaking or singing, rapping, you talked about respecting each other, as men and women respecting each other. And I guess, when I was also talking about being in Canyon de Chelly, and being with the people there, and looking at that rock, seeing that things are not just one way, as being this kind of, we tend to objectify each other. And othering.
Right.
And that creates, I think that's what's making this whole thing between male and female so difficult for us. And then, Christopher, when you were saying, like when you were talking, I felt like you're saying that the feminine is like this whisper and you have to listen. And I'm wondering, well, can you say more about, first, Lila, can you say something about it? It's very provocative.
I think that the idea that we are just feminine or just masculine is not compatible with my traditional worldview. We say we have our mother's side and our father's side, and we are built of the two rivers. And so we're neither fully masculine nor fully feminine. And so we harness the medicine of those two energies, the home and the arrow. Each has its own ability and is each is motivated by compassion. An arrow can be motivated by compassion, believe it or not, and that when those two are joined in compassion, there's a beauty. So that's my thoughts on it as of now. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, do you have any questions for Lila?
Well, I think it's so interesting, in our tradition, when we change our concept of self, we also change our concept of the universe and the world. And by looking upon Earth as our mother, just that in itself, that we do not own the Earth, we belong to the Earth, that changes our concept of self. It's a very, very powerful. Immediately we begin to walk differently. We feel differently about the earth. It struck me in what you were saying that very deeply, that it's a very powerful thing to hold on to. Very powerful thought to hold on to.
Yes, and I should note that I was plagiarizing, I think, Chief Seattle there.
God bless Chief Seattle.
Our earth does not belong to men, man belongs to the earth.
Yes,
and women,
yes,
for that
yes,
matter.
yes. Very powerful.
But I think it's okay to plagiarize in this time when the message needs to get out.
Yeah.
Well, you gave, you footnoted.
Well, you said you struggled to express it, but I think everyone in this room would agree that you did express it very powerfully. You know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not accidental, I think, that Hagia Sophia was not a doctoral dissertation. Unlike the dissertation I wrote, 300 pages to talk about this. Merton wrote a prose poem that form and content are deeply related, And so to be what you did here and what our musicians did and is draw us into an interrelationality, if you will, the in-betweenness that comes, she comes alive in the dance itself, I think. And so form and content are not two, but form renders content, and the content comes alive through the particular form,
May I interject something too that relates to what you were saying, Elizabeth, about we think we know, and then this interrelationship between form and content. When we meditate on a form of God, Chris and I were talking about how Christ was referred to as she by Julian of Norwich, and what does that mean? And also, in meditating on Ramakrishna, people have had the experience of the Black Virgin or of the Divine Mother. So what does that mean? It means that, I think Christ said it so well, that in my Father's house are many mansions. That within us, in our spiritual lives, when we have a genuine experience, then we become the symbol of that experience.
Yeah.
And these great men and women of God who've had these profound realizations of many different forms and formless aspects of the divine, by meditating on them, we become the inheritors of that experience. So they symbolize not a male, female, but they an experience itself.
Yeah. In the Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we do visualizations a lot, and like I often find myself visualizing myself as, a man with 4 arms who is yellow, or a female deity that is, green, with all one eye. There's this kind of agility and flexibility and fluidity to the practice, and it just seems very easy and because we are not one way. We're not stuck in some place. We are changing, and we're changing with our world, which is always moving and very dynamic. So I appreciate that part of the practice. And I appreciate also what you said, Lila, about, there are not just 2 genders. People identify in different ways, and we can be flexible with that and understand that, because we ourselves are not static.
Thank you.
Christopher, what do you think?
It's okay.
Quiet silence. I really think the 3 of you handled this topic brilliantly in your own ways. Like, I was telling you during the break that this image of fire, that it was very elemental. You can't remove this burning quality from fire itself. And the fire was the Brahma, and the Shakti was the burning quality. And it leaves you with this incredible, we know that because fire is such a big part of our experience, and yet there's also this kind of image of male and female and kind of dancing together, inseparable but different too. I love that. And then yours was so tender, Christopher. Like, I felt like you're speaking of the feminine as this kind of very tender, subtle, whispering thing, but you won't hear it if you don't pay attention. We need to pay attention. Can you say more about that? It was very tender to me, your talk.
Will we have a chance to let the audience ask us some questions?
Yeah, we can.
is.
Yeah, this is, well, shall we? You don't want to answer that one, maybe.
No.
Are you trying to get out of it?
Let me share one. I'll share one.
Okay, then we can ask the audience.
Yeah.
How's that?
Well, this is a book and a film that many in the audience, I suspect, will know, and that your question brings to mind the first novel by Sue Monk Kidd called The Secret Life of Bees. And it's a brilliant and beautiful novel, and at the center is the figure of the Black Madonna, who they call Our Lady in Chains, who occupies the center of this little house church. This is civil rights era, deep south in Mississippi. You know, there's a little white girl that comes into their world named Lily, and Lily longs to touch the heart of Our Lady in Chains, the Black Madonna. But she doesn't feel worthy or able to. She's haunted by guilt and shame over the death of her mother. And the sort of patronly black wisdom figure of that story, her name is August Boatwright, says to Lily one day, I wish you could have seen the faces of the Daughters of Mary. That's what they call their little house church. When they first saw her, Our Lady in Chains, she said, don't you see, Lily, everybody needs a God who looks like them. You know? That she, when you look at her, she looks back at you and recognizes you. And she becomes a vehicle, or as it were, a mirror to reflect your own divine dignity, your own divine humanity. And that's not nothing in civil rights era Mississippi, you know. And so it's just a beautiful story about the loving heart of God. You know, Italians worship, or pray to, rather, the Sacred Heart. In a way, it's a way of connecting to the divine, loving heart of God, who opens and welcomes us in. So if you haven't read the book, if you haven't seen the film, which is actually very, very good as well, it touches deeply on, I think, many of the themes that tenderness of the heart of God that we long to see reflected back at us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, well, let's open it up. We have 2 mics. I think I'm not wearing my glasses either, but I think there's one there and one there. That's a vague approximation. There and there. Somewhere.
Of bees. Life of bees.
So you have to line up to ask a question.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, thank you for the reflection of two-ness, and I'm adding the left and right side of the brain, because I think that's a very fundamental and important two-ness that we need to bring together. Also, in the Catholic tradition, the Feast of Transfiguration takes place the day that the little boy and the Trinity come together in the horrible experience. So that awareness comes to me every time we celebrate in August the Transfiguration, because the garments become dazzlingly white. And yet what happened with the atom bomb, what happened to people. My question, I have to confess that either I'm too arrogant or I don't have enough humility, because I heard your talks and the attitude, and I look at either the income inequality in this country. Most of us could afford to be here. Most of the poor people couldn't be here, aren't here. Secondly, the man at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, just this morning, the man that drove me here told me the analysis, by his fruits you shall know them. A woman analyzed his tweets. They're either about power or his own wealth. I cannot find anything admirable about the man at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So am I too arrogant? Do I not have enough humility? I'm not sure, but I certainly see his fruits, and I find not a thing about him and what he's doing to this country. So please help me.
Okay. Who should? So I don't know who you want to respond to this. Should we just all go around? Okay, this is a big one. June, would you like, Layla, would you like to?
Sure. I think there's this other seemingly like a paradox to hold love and truth at the same time, to hold fire and water at the same time. Because as I was healing from the abuse that occurred to my body, I did one of two things. I either saw the truth of the cruelty and I became filled with hatred and anger, or I rose tinted it and said, oh, it's not that bad, or it was my fault, or whatever, and that allowed me to have love. Because it's like, oh, well, I'll just make it something that it isn't so that I can love it. Like, oh, they didn't mean to, or they weren't that bad, or they didn't mean to do that. So then I had compassion for them. And my mentors asked me to not only lift that rose-tinted glass and see the cruelty for all that it is, but to also confront that cruelty with love, compassion, and forgiveness. And so they said, okay, Lila, go down the line of every abuser. In your mind's eye, look them in the eye. Understand what they did to you. Maybe they drugged you. Maybe they guilted you. Maybe they manipulated you. And really hold the depth of the cruelty for all that it is. And then pray for them. And say a prayer for them. Ask for their life to be good. Ask for their wounds to be healed. Luckily, you don't have to do that while seeing them at all. They're far away. So you do it from a safe place. But to hold that truth. So I appreciate you speaking this truth. You know, that there is a truth of injustice. There is a truth of us stepping away from Creator when we are not trying to bring in the poor, when we are not trying to uplift the poor, erase the poor, in a sense that erase poverty. And also the truth that there are many injustices occurring in the capital of this country. But to do so with love would be the two-ness that comes to mind when you speak about that. And how do we confront this with love? We give people a second chance. We fight for the healing of their soul. So I often call him my Uncle Trump. I say, my uncle, because then it's, I have to recognize as a Dene woman, we say, we're connected, we're kin. Each and every one of you is my kin. Trump is my kin. Therefore, I can't give up on him. I can't give up on his spirit, on his heart, and his soul. Clearly, he had some sort of trauma. I'm serious. And I've been through trauma. I know it's challenging. And so we pray for him, but that doesn't mean we stop working each and every day to correct the injustices we see.
I believe there are two students up there, and we'd like to take them as the two questions we have time for. So.
Okay. If we believe in a creator or an eternal being and acknowledge the things that they have done, why do we need organized religion to live a full life?
Yeah.
What was the question again?
Yeah, can you say it one more time? I missed the last part.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Speak slowly.
Sorry.
Yeah.
If we believe in a creator or an eternal being and acknowledge the things that they have done, why do we need organized religion to live a full life?
Well, I don't believe in a creator God. Brahman didn't create. It's the uncreated. This world is Maya. Our job is to break the illusion. It's like if your house is on fire. Do you ask, who set the fire? Where's the match? You get out. And so these time-tested religious traditions offer a way. It's sort of like if you'd like to experiment with chemicals, do you just go into the chemistry lab and start putting chemicals together? Or do you go to a chemistry teacher and say, okay, how does this work? That is the value of a religious tradition. And so that would be my answer. So your question.
I can only, speak for myself in the sense that I need a community, I need a container, as it were, guideposts, I need guardrails, and for me, the Catholic tradition has been that. Though in my 20s, I wandered a lot. I explored Buddhism especially. I was a student at Naropa University in Boulder for a while. My community was Merton talks about, and many others have talked about crossing over. And what I discovered in crossing over was actually the deeper roots of my own Catholic tradition. That Buddhism, as it were, taught me elements of my own Catholicism that I had taken for granted and that had not explored. And that's where Merton as well was a beautiful guide for me. I think we all need spiritual mentors, teachers, guides. And even if we know that the people sitting next to us in church are really messed up, right? The thing is, I am too. And so I think we could do a lot better in our churches of creating, as you said earlier, about male spirituality, creating open spaces where we can come as we are and share our vulnerabilities, our imperfections together, I think AA is a fantastic model for what our churches might look and feel a little bit more like, so that I sometimes I don't know how people walk through the world without some community to share their own gifts with, but also to receive from. So that's how I would answer your beautiful question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. So, yeah, please up there at the mic.
Appreciate the fact you thought I was one of the students.
Like I said, I'm not wearing glasses.
Yeah, it's fine. He was using an electronic device. I wrote my stuff down. But I definitely appreciate the recent discussion about form and content, and it doesn't surprise me that such deep spiritual thinkers speak many languages. And my question is for Ms. Layla June. You used the word medicine in your talk, and I've heard that word brought up before from folks who have an indigenous heritage. So I didn't know if the English word medicine, if we miss stuff. I think we're here because we're seeking medicine. And you bring up that word, and I'm just wondering, in your heritage, if it is either under-translated or mistranslated, or if this is just the easiest word to use, but if you could speak more about the word that you use, medicine. Thank you.
Thank you. So in Denebazad, our language, the word is azeh. You guys say that? Azeh.
Azeh.
Azeh is, it's not so much a physical thing like a pill or like a scalpel or a surgery, but it's more of like a spirit. And every culture around the world has this connection to this spirit, whether you call it Reiki or Chi or Prana or Yin, Shka, Holy Spirit. There's this understanding of this force. Oh yeah, that's what Yoda calls it, is a force. The force, right? And so this substance, which is not physical and yet allows the physical to exist, and it's a real thing, is what I refer to as medicine. And that can be given by smiling at someone when you walk down the sidewalk and you pass someone you don't know. You're giving them medicine, a compliment, telling someone they look beautiful today, that's medicine. Letting people know that you're praying for them, that's medicine. Trying to create a society that's more about mutual success, and my success is your success, instead of, I hope I'm better than you, or else I will feel insecure. That kind of medicine of giving to the whole, I think is what I mean by that. But I think it's a good word in English. It's one of the few words in English that actually works for us. And we like that word. We like that. There's just a few that we can handle. But medicine, we like to use that word. So that's probably why you hear it in so many different Native nations, because that's what we're talking about. Like, how do we be channels through which that medicine can come? Before I speak, the elders say, pray to be a hollow bone. Pray to be so empty that the medicine has room to move through you. And the genius, root word genie, meaning spirit, was not someone who was so great, but rather could get out of the way enough for the spirit to move through them. And that genie is the medicine. And it's talked about in every religion in different ways, but it's a special, special substance, and it is activated through compassion and no fear. And those are the only two things you need, just no fear and compassion. Easy, right? And that's all I have to say about that, yeah.